Yo, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Urban Absurdity. I'm your host, OG Ron.
And I'm Bianca Brown.
And we have two special guests in the house today.
Yay!
And I'll let them introduce themselves. Put them on the spot.
Hi, I'm Patricia Smith. I'm a school psychologist for a school district. And what else would you like to know?
Now you put me on the spot.
Well,
we'll go to her now. We introduce herself.
Go to the introduction part first. Yeah, and then we'll go into everything we need to know.
Now, who is this young lady right here?
Okay, thanks for calling me young. My name is Kristina Brown, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. I work for a small nonprofit in Kansas City where we provide counseling to a very specific population of people who've been affected by child abuse, neglect, family trauma, things like that. But I have some training in like working with adults, adolescents, kids. I do family therapy, couples.
Couples therapy?
You name it.
I'm going to need your card. This is a special episode on mental health. We're going to ask questions. We're basically going to ask the experts this episode. Me and Bianca are off today. We've written down a lot of questions, and we're just going to let them do the work just to basically dispel some myths, find out some facts, just everything we need to know about mental health, because I don't know anything. I learned some stuff when I was researching because it was so much to read, like all of these subcategories. I felt like I haven't written an article all week just getting ready for this.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's how I make a little money on my website. I ain't made no money this week. But I think this is important, so we will discuss this. So, I think my first question is going to be, like, when I first started hearing about mental health, I had no idea what it meant. Like, we all know about physical health and how you should stay in shape, exercise, things like that. But what is mental health and why is it important, and how do you maintain or improve it if you're in, like, poor mental health? Or is that possible? I think I just asked 3 questions at one time.
Yeah.
So just go in there and fill out what you want to answer. Just come with.
Okay.
What is mental health? Like, I mean,
I think it's the condition of your mind, your thoughts, your ideas, and the things that help you get along in life. Like how you mentally think and feel should be just as healthy as your physical condition. So your mental condition should be just as healthy as your physical condition in order to get along in life, basically.
okay.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of things that a lot of people don't realize how our mental health and physical health are really, really connected to each other. So, I think most of us actually have more knowledge about our mental health than we think, because really our mental health is made up of like how we believe, what our thoughts about things are, and then how that connects to our feelings. So if you think about it, we have a way of believing a certain thing, like a set of beliefs that dictates how we think about stuff, whether things are true to us or not. And then that triggers our feelings about things. So when we experience stuff, it comes against our belief system. And then we think about it a certain way, and then we feel something, and then we may or may not act. So all of that is really connected, and that's kind of what your mental health system is. And then based on how you feel and how you deal with your feelings, that can affect your physical health. There are lots of physical health issues that arise really from how you are dealing or not dealing with your mental health. So it's all very connected. It's like a little system, web kind of thing.
Kristina be knowing, just so y'all know.
Yeah, it sounded like
Laid it out.
She be knowing. I'm like, well, it's just.
I'm going to get my pad out.
That's why she here.
And your voice is so small. You can just move up just a little bit when you talk. I was listening like.
Who, me?
And I got on headphones. I still want to be like.
Okay, let me move up.
Okay, I have a question. I want to go back a little bit. Like, what made you guys get into mental health? Like, what was the triggering point to say, this is the profession that I want to jump into?
When I was younger, I always wanted to be, like, maybe a psychologist or a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure how I got that idea, but I also wanted to be a teacher. And so actually going through undergrad, they exposed us to different career paths in the field of psychology. And so when a school psychologist came to talk to us about what they did, I'm like, that's a happy marriage, education and psychology. And so I felt like I could impact kids better if I was in the schools, and that was the perfect career for me. And then I actually had a traumatic childhood growing up, and so I think kids have always had a special place in my heart. Like, I wanted to be that, what we call protective factor, or someone who had an impact on kids, and to make sure that they knew that they were more than their circumstances. So,
Right.
So being in the schools is something that's very important to me, and school psychology allows me to do that.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
So very similarly to Patricia, when I was growing up, my parents got divorced when I was about 10. And I remember that being really hard for me. Like, it was devastating, just like tore me up as a young kid. And my school counselor was real pivotal in just my ability to put myself back together and like function at school and feel somewhat normal. And I remember how much I just loved her for being with me and like letting me feel however I felt. Because at home, my mom would kind of be like, you know, you need to get it together. You need to suck it up. You need to do this homework.
Yeah.
Right.
I see you crying or whatever, but you're going to do this work while you're crying. I mean, it just was my mom didn't know how to deal.
Right.
She really didn't know how to deal. But my school counselor was just there for me in a major way. But that still didn't make me think that that's what I wanted to do. So, you know, I go through school and all of that. And I was an early childhood teacher, so I worked with like really little kids. And I still love really little kids. And I was in the classroom setting for like 7 years. And any classroom teacher will tell you that, like, after a certain number of years, you just get burnt out in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And I kept thinking, how can I still have a real major impact on families and small children and not be in the classroom? Like, how can I really get into the meat of what's going on with families? And I went to grad school for counseling. And as I was in it, I was just like, this is what God put me on this earth to do. Like, this is literally what he has been at every turn in my life. He has been getting me to this point. And now I know this is why I'm here, to do this. And so that's how I feel. Like, every time I'm with a client, I just be sitting there like,
I just love what I do.
Thank you, Lord. I'm so blessed. This is awesome. And they be talking about awful stuff, you know, and I'm just like,
oh my God. I'm like, why are you smiling?
Right. Well, you know, I try not to be cheesy, but I just feel very, very happy doing what I do.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, being that both of you went down these career paths that you're on, is it like, does it surprise you that so many people have no idea what mental health is, the effects and the symptoms and the signs?
It doesn't surprise me. It makes me sad.
Yeah.
I wish more people were aware, but it doesn't surprise me because, you know, as we grew up, nobody was talking to us about this. It's just not a part of our conversation. It's not a part of the conversation in this country, like as a societal thing. We don't grow up, or we're not even taught to really parent our children from a perspective of helping them understand their thoughts and feelings and how to manage them well. And if you think about it from a societal standpoint, you know, we don't tolerate anger. You know, you're not allowed to just be walking around in the world angry. You know, people think that's not okay. When it is, I mean, anger is a feeling that we all have. We just are not taught how to manage it well. So it doesn't surprise me because I just don't think that we put enough effort into making it, you know, a part of, or acknowledging its presence the way that, I mean, it's a big deal. Like all of us have this mental health system that we deal with from the time that we're born. I don't know why we don't think it's important enough to talk about it.
I was just about to ask that question. Like, in school, you got physical education, you got sex education. Like, why wouldn't you have mental education?
No, I do think the schools are doing a better job of having mental health professionals a part of the teams to help kids. Like, for example, we have social workers or school counselors who are there, and they, some of the time they're going into classrooms doing like short maybe parts of the curriculum to teach them social skills, to teach them how to deal with anger, to teach them how to deal with feelings of sadness and things like that. But at home, like, you spend the first 5 years of your life at home, and if your family is not talking to you about your feelings and teaching you how to deal with them, then you've basically been molded a certain way. Mm-hmm. And then you get to school, it's like they may not be ready to open up or talk about it at school. But I think in our Black families, it's passed down from generation to generation that in a lot of households, not all of them, because I don't want to overgeneralize, but a lot of households, we learn to deal with things we feel by either praying about it, or our parents are telling us to shake it off. That shouldn't bother you, or get over it, or something like that. Or we're just not taught how to deal with what we're feeling and how we're behaving. And so when we get to the schools, we may not be ready to learn the things that the social workers or the school counselors are presenting to the kids, because sometimes kids are also told what stays in the house, or what goes on in the house stays in the house. Yeah. And so they don't feel free to open up about what's going on with them and talking through it. So
that's very true. Mm-hmm. I've seen that. It's like people self-medicate, even teenagers, instead of, because they feel like it's really not a problem, or they don't understand how real of a problem it is if it's not treated. So I've seen that before.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
You know, that is pervasive. That whole, well, it's not really a problem mentality. I think that's what keeps a lot of people of all races, but particularly Black people, from seeking mental health services, because they think, well, it's not that bad. Like, it's not a real problem. Like, if you think, let me give you a real life example. So maybe somebody who has been out of work for a few months, and they're doing a job search. So they're looking for jobs. We all know that a job search, like, over a period of time, is stressful. Like, that will drive you to the brink of craziness, right? Like, it starts making you feel all kind of things about yourself. You start questioning, well, am I even qualified to do? I mean, there's all kind of stuff that starts happening to you. But most people will not go talk to someone through a situation like that, because they think, well, it's not a mental health. It's not that. I'm just looking for a job. You know what I mean? It's not that bad. It's not. And I don't know why we do that. Like, that's stressful. That's traumatic to you. Especially, like, if you do get fired or you get laid off, that's stressful, because then that does something to your self-esteem, like how you feel about yourself. It makes you worry about how you're going to provide for you. There are so many layers. And stress is the number one cause, like, from mental health to physical health. Stress will drive the numbers of heart attack, stroke, lung disease, like, all that stuff. You know, stress exacerbates cancer. I mean, it makes physical health issues worse. But we will think, we'll be in the middle of this real stressful life situation and think, oh, but it's not, you know.
I'm going to pray about it.
Yeah. It'll be all right.
Y'all
you know
pray
what I mean? I'm cool.
And that's usually what I say too, because, like, just going off what you were saying, like, stress is a big part of my day and my daily life. You know what I mean? So, and I usually deal with it just by, well, Bianca's my therapist, actually. It's like every Sunday for 2 hours,
now
like,
right.
Everything's released for 2 hours. It's like, but after this, like, as soon as you guys leave, I gotta go to work.
Right.
I don't love my job, but I have to be there. Got tons of bills. Want to have time to do my website. Want to have time to make the podcast grow. Family issues, girlfriend, don't have time. It's like, basically I'm saying, so when does it, okay, say if I'm stressed for 2 weeks, like really stressed out, like feeling real bad. Like, at what point does, like, it become clinical? Like, what point do you have to go and say, okay, this is not how I want to feel anymore? When do I need help?
That's awesome. That's an awesome question.
Bianca's laughing at me.
Listen, first of all, people, you all know I laugh at Ron. However, I was very excited about you guys coming, because I said, great. They're going to get to talk to Ron and get to the bottom of it.
I'm going to use it for some free counseling. That's what I'm doing.
How much do you charge?
That's what we do to each
Bro,
other.
look, I was like, Kristina, girl, if you were my friend, you would definitely be my therapist. Girl. Okay, so let's define mental illness, mental health conditions, things like that. First, I want to say this. I don't really like to call it mental illness because it kind of still adds a stigma to the idea of it adds to thinking that something's wrong and you're wrong or something, you're not right, that kind of thing. I like to think of it as a mental health need, but just for purposes of definition, mental illness, mental health condition, it becomes clinical when certain things come up. So the things that you're struggling with, like depression or feelings of sadness and things like that, if it is more than 2 weeks and you can't shake that feeling or that mood, and it's causing a problem with your relationships, it starts to impact your ability to function at work. Like when it starts to impact your major activities of life, getting along with people, relating to people, going to work, eating, sleeping, all of those things, more than 2 weeks, I say that's a problem. And you probably need to be talking to somebody about it. And you can start with just your doctor and saying, these are the things I'm feeling, and it's been longer than 2 weeks. But if you're going to get professional help, it's important to say like exactly what you're going through, like not even leaving anything out. So, you know, sometimes you go in the doctor's office, you don't tell them everything.
Right.
They don't need to know that.
Better that.
No, it's really critical that you tell everything because they need to make sure that they're identifying the right problem. You could have depression. You could have a form of anxiety. You could have something else going on. But to answer your question, a mental health condition or a mental health need becomes really serious when it starts to impact your major life functioning. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm thinking because I'm way past that point.
Yeah.
And you know what?
I mean, seriously,
and
too.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And so let me also say this. Many of us use our friends and family, you know.
That was my next question.
Yeah. Many of us do that. And that's not a bad thing. So I'm not going to say don't do that. That's not, you know. Sometimes if you have enough tools in your life toolbox that as stuff is happening to you and it is impacting your functioning, but you can pick up on it, like Ron's like, I got this, and this is where I am. That's a lot of self-awareness because you're able to put your finger on it and be like, yeah. So talking to people that you know can support you, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good coping skill. So that's good. But when that's not enough, that's when it's okay, you know, to go talk to somebody professionally. And it, you know, sometimes we think that when you go talk to a therapist, it's this long-term, I'm about to get a diagnosis, I'm laying on the couch, you know, I'm on the brink of, it doesn't have to be that dire. You know, it's okay to come in short-term. Like you could go to a therapist for a really short period of time, maybe a couple of months, because you coming in and you already know what's up. You know what's stressing you out. You know where you need help with balance or whatever. And they can just kind of help you get to where you need to be to just straighten that out, and then you out of there. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be this long thing, like because you use the word clinical, and I think sometimes people feel like, well, it's not that bad. It don't have to be bad. Right. It's okay to not wait until it's bad to go talk to somebody. Like,
that's one thing that scares black people when it comes to mental and physical health. Like you think if you go to the doctor and say my finger hurt, you're going to come out like, oh, I got cancer. You're going to think they found something. Yes. And all of a sudden, then it seems like that's like a sentence all of a sudden when, like you'll be functioning normally. You go to the hospital, get a physical or something like that, and all of a sudden something wrong with you. Oh, I feel sick now. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's not funny, but that's really how a lot of us think. Yep. Like, because like I'm a 40-year-old man, I should be going to the hospital a lot more than I do. You know what I mean?
With the doctor.
You
going to the doctor.
She said that with her coffee. With the doctor.
Because if you go to the hospital more, I'll be like, Rob, what's going on?
I'm just up here chilling. I ain't seeing nobody. No, you know what I meant.
Why are you here?
My friends all in the emergency room.
It's a party? Okay. Okay, I have a question. I have another one. I'm sorry. And it's about me.
Okay.
I have a lot of friends and just people in general who will say, I really don't. No, I have people that'll come to me and ask me questions or just talk about their lives and things. And the first time someone will come to talk about it, you listen. The second time you'll listen. The third time. But then I'm not a good person to vent to. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest because I believe in being honest on what type of person you are. Mm-hmm. I like to give my opinion. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I tell people, if you just want to vent and let it out, I don't think I'm the best person to talk to. Mm-hmm. And only because I care too much. So when people say, well, you should be a friend to just listen to your friends and to vent to. However, I don't think people understand that if you are a caring person, if your friend that you're talking to is a caring person, you're also dealing with their mental health too.
Absolutely.
Facts.
Because if you tell me certain things and it bothers me and it upsets me, and you keep coming to me and telling me these things, then I'm stressing about your situation. Yep. And then 2 weeks later, you may not even have that issue, or you may just try to cover that issue up, but I'm still worried. And I have my own things to worry about. And I think that as young people too, I don't think that we don't get the point of your friends. Maybe it's not that they don't want to listen to you. It's just that they have to protect themselves too. So if they say, well, I think you should talk to somebody, I believe in telling people, talk to someone who doesn't know you. Yeah. Because they're not going to be as judgmental. Like they're not going to think the same things that I may think. And plus they're professionals. So they'll know exactly how to, but then it's like, well, if you tell me to talk to somebody else, you're not trying to be my friend. No, I am. I'm also trying to protect myself, and I'm trying to make sure that you go and have the talks that you need with someone who could help, because but I get called the bad person. So what is that a bad thing?
No. Not absolutely not. It is vicarious trauma that you were describing. It's like you take on the trauma that's happening to your friends, and it kind of messes with you. Like you've noticed, it messes with your
and that's real.
Yeah. That's totally real. What you're describing.
Because I'm pretty sure we've all had people in our lives who, whether it's a significant other or a friend or whoever, that they're into it with, and they do something wrong to this person, they tell you about it, you get upset, like, you did this and my friend did it, and then a week later they're friends again or they're in a relationship again, and you're kind of like,
and I'm still
mad at you. I
am not.
And then they tell you like, well, I got over it. You should get over it. Well, we are not the same people. So that's not how. And that's why I say, well, I'm telling you not to tell me. But then I get called like, and not just friends, just people in general. I hear people do it all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally up to you to decide how you want to take in information. If this is your friend, I think it's okay to be honest with them about like why you're not wanting to engage in a certain way. But explain that you do care about them, and if they do want you to be a part of the conversation, what are your boundaries? So I mean,
that's healthy. Like what you're doing is exactly the right thing to do, because a lot of times people don't set boundaries, and they are the person that will just take everybody's stuff, and then they end up being overly stressed out. But that is, what Patricia said is correct. Vicarious trauma is a very real thing, and as mental health people, we experience it a lot because our main role is to be with other people through their stuff. But we receive training. Like I go to professional development to learn how to deal with vicarious trauma. Regular people in life don't. They just out here picking up other people's baggage and carrying it around with them.
Don't know what to do with it.
Don't realize that it's weighing them down. Well, that's part of my job. And I know I get paid for that. So I'm like, I know how to sift through it.
Let me go ahead. And Ron, I'm not talking about you. So don't be over here
I'm over here just soaking it all in.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm just
tell her nothing else.
But I'm one of those people too. Like when you brought up the term vicarious trauma, I'm thinking like, I've traumatized a lot of people because I come with the heavy stuff. Like I wait a little while. Like I might not just come with you and discuss something with you if it's small. You know what I mean? I kind of just hold it in until I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to call in today and I'm going to just go dump all this stuff on my homeboy. You know what I mean?
Got some stuff I want to say.
I mean, because my girl's around, but it's like certain things, certain things you discuss with different people. Like I have certain people, like if I'm stressed at work, I'll talk to her about it. If I'm not happy with the pace that as far as what I want to do for a career and a living or something like that, I'll go to a homeboy and talk to him about that. So, yeah, wow, I didn't know I was traumatizing people.
And let me tell you something about the free game right here. Uh-oh. So at work,
we like free on this show.
We'll take it.
At work, most companies have to do things to improve people's well-being. Mm-hmm. Just by employing them, they have benefits that. So, for example, the Employee Assistance Program. A lot of companies and places of business, you may not be aware of it, but they have the program where if you want to maybe get financial services, legal advice, or mental health services, you can start with your job's Employee Assistance Program.
Yep.
What they would do is allow you to get, I think, like a confirmation number, and you find a therapist or a place that's listed in the network or the system, and you can get a few sessions for free. So you can start out by just going to your Employee Assistance Program through your human resources. If your job or boss doesn't talk to you guys regularly about that thing, but human resources is the place to start. Or you can go to your job's website. I'm not sure if they put it on there, but that's a place to start for free, just to get an idea of if you'd like to be able to talk to somebody on a regular basis. You can start there.
And it's super underutilized.
Yes.
Like employee assistance programs, a lot of people have them and don't realize it, but they're super underutilized. And so if you think about that, you could get maybe like 6 to 8 sessions for free. That's dope.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's a good amount of time to spend with a professional. You might be able to work through a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
Well, matter of fact, when I go to work, I might have to bring that up because I have the most stressful job on earth. Like, I'm going to work today. It's like I work for Coca-Cola.
Oh,
and our peak season starts in April and ends in December.
Wow. Like,
there's sometimes we might work like 4 weeks straight and have a day off and work 3 weeks. Wow. And then, we really pump it out down there.
That's a lot. I guarantee you Coca-Cola has an employee assistance program.
I'm going to have to look that up. Even if I don't even have anything on my chest, I want everything free that they offer.
Heard you offer this.
Right. Free is free.
Being there laying on the couch, just talking shop. Like, hey, whatever is on my mind for the day.
Yep. Now, I think some people may know about it, but they feel like if something comes up, they're going to tell my job.
Nope. That's
so how does that, okay.
And you actually have to sign an agreement. Like, I think they make you sign the HIPAA form, whatever therapist you go to, because we're not allowed to talk about anything that people tell us unless you say you're going to, hurt yourself or kill somebody. Then we would have to get people involved to keep others safe. But as far as anything else you're going through, everything is confidential.
Yep.
Okay.
Your coworkers don't know. Your employee or employer, your boss wouldn't know. It's between you and the person that you link up with.
Okay, so when they find out like that you've been using these services or something like that, there's no way they can call him. Like, okay, what is he? Because
absolutely not.
He's kind of standoffish down here. Is he okay? He ain't talking about hurting nobody.
Absolutely not.
Nope.
And I think a lot of people will think like that.
They do.
Because some people, when their company offers services, they say, "Well, I ain't gonna use my job stuff. I don't want them to find out."
Yeah. You can go in there and tell them you've been stealing the staples and all that, and they won't tell them.
Shout out to HIPAA, man. Shout out. We're keeping my stuff confidential.
You are protected.
You're protected.
Yeah, that's a big thing that maybe some people don't know about seeking therapy in general. Just how serious confidentiality is, and how serious we as mental health professionals take that. We don't discuss, we don't even confirm or deny that somebody is a client.
That's right.
So I mean, it's locked down, in terms of confidentiality, and really the only exceptions are like what Patricia said. If you are talking about hurting yourself or killing somebody else, then there's a duty to warn. Then that's it. That's the only exception to confidentiality. Yeah.
Interesting.
Seek
help, people. You just go out, just talk to anybody. Yeah, because you think that too. Even if you have like medical. A lot of people don't use it. A lot of people don't use or take advantage. I was one of those people who I'm paying out of my paycheck all the time. Yeah. And I'm not using what I'm paying for. So I'm thinking like,
and to be honest, I'm like that too.
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like, it took me forever to find me a primary health physician. But I'm not kidding. My mom was on me for a long time. Like, why don't you have a primary? I don't know, Mom. I don't know.
It's there when I need it. That's how I think. Like, if I need it, yeah.
Right. But we get kind of caught up in the day-to-day, just trying to do what we have to do. Yeah. And sometimes we convince ourselves we don't have time to take care of ourselves when really we do. Because we make time for all the other gibberish that we do in our lives. Yeah. It's okay to prioritize taking care of ourselves.
Right.
All right, well, I got this question, and this comes from, the picture Bionica shared on TV. I'm on TV. On Facebook.
Yes. On my page, Bionica Brown.
And this might not be what she had or whatever like that, but I just want to talk about this. Schizophrenia. Why is that, like, when you see, the only knowledge I have of it, of course, is movies. And when you see people, like in a movie, it's like they're chained down or they have a straitjacket on and like a face guard or something like that. Is that extreme? What exactly is that?
Well, there's different levels to each of the mental health conditions. And I don't know why movies depict different mental health conditions in the most extreme cases, maybe for entertainment. But I will tell you this, in my opinion, I think a good depiction of schizophrenia would be the movie A Beautiful Mind. It came out a long time ago, like maybe in the 2000s. But what was his name? Kevin Spacey played, I think his name was Professor Robert Nash. I may be having... look it up. I may not have the names right, but it is based on a true story. But he was, I think, either a mathematician or a math professor. Or he was really smart, and he had this. They take you through the movie as if he is working for the CIA and doing all these different things. But at the end of the movie, you find out all those things that they took you through the movie was a figment of his imagination, or it was hallucinations and delusions. But watch that movie and you'll see what schizophrenia may be like. One form of schizophrenia.
Okay, well, I have to watch that because I only see extreme examples.
A Beautiful Mind.
Oh, okay. Well, Russell Crowe.
Oh, girl, look, I said
no, but it is an old one. It was 2001. I've heard about the movie. I've never watched it.
Russell Crowe. Okay. My bad, y'all. But it is based
but she got the title. It's A Beautiful Mind.
I think to answer your question too about why it's depicted in its most extreme form. We as Americans, we like to be entertained. We like things given to us in a way that it grabs our attention. It's exciting. It gets sensationalized. So I think what gets put in front of us sometimes are the extreme symptoms for the shock value and all of that. But schizophrenia can look so many different ways. Right. And like Patricia said, with most mental health disorders, there's like, there are qualifiers. There's mild, moderate, and severe. So symptoms can be really mild. They can be, once a person meets all the criteria for a diagnosis for a disorder, the symptoms can be mild, moderate, or severe. So it doesn't, one person, or you can have a room full of people with the same diagnosis and they're not going to all present the same way. And I think it's unfortunate that we do people like that. That mental health mental health issues are portrayed in their most extreme form, because I think that contributes to people just
the stigma.
Yeah, the stigma and people staying away and not wanting to talk.
Because I ain't crazy.
Right. Not wanting to talk about what they're experiencing. And it's really hard. People go into denial, when even if they see maybe their kids displaying certain symptoms, they don't want to believe that could be a real issue. Right. But I think that's why that's what we see. I think it's interesting that you asked about schizophrenia specifically. Is there a reason for that?
No, not a big reason. When I think about mental health, it's just like she said, like when I look it up, like very rarely you see a mental disorder, you see mental illness, like as a person is sick. So when I look different types of mental health, schizophrenia just kept popping up.
Okay.
And and when I watch movies, just like I said, it's always, every time they use that term, it's like, this person you don't want to go in that room.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's why I just thought about that.
Right. Well, since you asked about it, I didn't know if this was part of it, but since you asked about it, I do want to say this. Black males are disproportionately diagnosed with schizophrenia more than any other demographic of people. I don't know if y'all know
what age range?
Well, schizophrenia.
Ain't 35 to 42, is it? I gotta go get checked out.
I'm not.
I knew something that y'all said was gonna have me at work like thinking. I'm one of those people, like I hold something in like at work like.
But I said disproportionately.
That sounded like me a little bit. I didn't say anything on the show.
Rod is the type of person to watch the infomercials at night and be like, I got that too. I do.
They talking about me.
I can't sleep.
That's hypochondria.
Right. That's another one. That's a different one. But I said disproportionately to say that, there are disparities in mental health, just like there are in physical health things. Like we hear about all the statistics about how most Black people are more likely to experience things, mental health issues or physical health issues or whatever. But there is such a thing as overdiagnosing or misdiagnosing. And so Black men are disproportionately diagnosed with schizophrenia more than other groups of people in this country, which I would actually say that means that not that Black men have it more, they're just diagnosed more, and not necessarily accurate.
All right, and that leads to one of my questions I had written down. With over this is what I read. Y'all tell me if it's a fact. Over 200 different types of mental illnesses or disorders.
I ain't never counted.
Is it hard to diagnose though with so many?
There are a lot. There are a lot.
I mean, can somebody leave? Like if you come in and get checked out, and when they give you a diagnosis, can you have like more than one?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
And so I do want to say something about how hard it is to diagnose. So, Patricia and I are both trained. We're both trained to diagnose. What I remember most about my training was how much the symptoms overlap, like among the disorders. Like there are the common ones have so many of the same symptoms that it's like you have to be very careful before you diagnose and label somebody with something that you are ruling out all the other things that it could be because so many things look alike. Like so many disorders look similar. A lot of the things that we're starting to learn with all the research that comes out about trauma and just how having a traumatic experience in your life, how that can cause you to present a certain way, and how the symptoms of trauma and how you deal with trauma can look like depression. Right. Might not necessarily be depression, but it can look like it. Right. It can look like bipolar disorder. It can look like ADHD. It can look like, it can be difficult to diagnose. And so I'm not an diagnosis person, but I am anti-labels because I think that labels contribute to stigma. I think learning how to diagnose and keeping up with the practice of diagnosing is good for clinicians because then it helps us to ultimately know how to treat things. Right. So for me, as a practicing therapist, I try very hard not to diagnose people with anything. Now I'm keeping all the criteria in my mind. So as I'm working with a person over several sessions, I am really assessing. I might use specific assessment tools and all that. I might say, okay, so all of these symptoms I'm seeing are very consistent with this diagnosis. But I may or may not necessarily tell that person, this is what you're diagnosed with. I use that information to inform how I'm going to work with them, to help them overcome what they're going through. For some people, receiving a diagnosis isn't helpful. For some people, it actually makes them feel worse. And depending on the situation, like if it's a kid or the person is working in a specific area, a diagnosis or a label can be really detrimental maybe to their career or to them in school or whatever. And so if you don't have to, I'm of the mind that if I don't have to do that, then I won't. But for some people, they want a diagnosis.
Right.
They want to know
why
why is this happening? And a diagnosis might make them feel better.
Right.
And if I know that to be the case, then I would probably do it for that reason only. But really, the whole purpose of diagnosing is to know and inform the clinician on how to treat. What things are clinically proven to help with depression. There are specific therapeutic tools that are proven to help with depression, to help with anxiety, to help with trauma. If you have like PTSD, there are some specific things that are clinically proven to help with a specific diagnosis. But it can be very hard to accurately diagnose.
And mental health professionals do have a manual that they use to make the diagnosis. It's like we don't have to commit it to memory. We can go back to, we call it the DSM, and it gets updated periodically, but it's called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. And so it just gives us symptoms, criteria that the person has to meet in order to get the diagnosis. So that's why it's important to, know what you're looking for. And it is also important for the person seeking help to be honest about what they're experiencing.
Yes.
You hearing voices, you better tell that person. You seeing things that are not there and nobody else can see, you need to tell your mental health professional so we can get to the right. And I say that because some people may leave things like that out because they don't want to have a label that they consider crazy. So anyways, I think it's really important to be honest and open and to help the clinician or the mental health professional figure out what's going on.
All right, Miana, you got a question? Because I got a lot of them.
There's one that in the Black community we hear about a lot. And I hear a lot of people say, I've even said it before, bipolar.
Okay.
Like, we'll hear people say, she's bipolar.
Oh, she's bipolar.
Or he's a little bipolar. What does that mean? What are like signs of...
Okay.
Yeah, because I know that's a lot, but I think that's the one that I hear people say the most. And then I have to think too, like, I'm not a...
Right.
What am I saying?
I mean, there's a lot of terms that get kind of thrown around, you know, that in regular language. And I think, I don't know, I'm not going to say it's bad. I mean, I think it could be good. It could be bad. I don't really know. I'm not going to put a judgment on it. But what I am going to say is that many times it's, people will use the terms from an uninformed standpoint, are not really sure what they're even using, why they're saying it.
Right.
They just have an idea of what they think bipolar means, and then they will categorize someone like that. But, bipolar disorder is a real diagnosis. It's a real thing with real criteria that a clinician would be looking for before they would give somebody that diagnosis. And just a real basic description of what bipolar disorder is or what it would look like without being like super clinical or whatever is, we think about people in terms of a baseline, and baseline is just kind of typical functioning for people, right? If a person is functioning below baseline for a specific amount of time, like over 2 weeks, then that would be in the depression symptom territory. And if we have a person that's functioning above baseline, and what that looks like is mania, that's like the clinical term is mania. So a person is at like a heightened level of energy, and you might have seen that with people when it doesn't necessarily have to look like, it can look like elevated happiness for a long time. It can look like happiness. It can look like nervousness. It can look like...
It can also look like, and people don't pay attention to this a lot, but it could look like risky behavior. Like, I just slept with 15 people in 1 week, or just going on rampages like that.
Yeah.
And...
or it can look like hyper productivity too.
Yeah, I got a lot done.
Oh, I'm at work killing, but they like,
hold on now.
I mean,
hold on now.
Look, I'm really like.
So if we think
I
about
got a little stuff done last week out of nowhere.
I'm not gonna look at you, Ron. But so think about it even in terms of energies. When you're around people and you feel their energy, like their vibration, are they vibrating real low, under the way they typically are, that could be under baseline. But if you have someone that's vibrating at a high energy for a good period of time and you're like, that's a lot, like you're doing a lot, whether it's a lot nervous, a lot real happy, because stuff's happening in your body physically when you are functioning at a super high energy level at an extended period of time. Your heart rate is way up. Yeah. Your brain is secreting and producing certain hormones that's causing your brain to function at a certain level that it cannot sustain for a long time. So that's kind of why it gets dangerous. Even when people are just like happy, but they're happy like for a good amount of time and you're like, I'm happy you happy, but that's a lot. What I mean? Your energy real high, and you can feel it coming off of people. So that's kind of what we would describe as mania. There's way more technical. I could get really technical about it, but I'm trying to paint the picture where, you probably have seen it, where it's relatable. Okay. So when you have someone that is, going above and below baseline, that is what we would consider to be bipolar, like symptoms of bipolar disorder. When there is when they are you seeing above and below, and to a certain extent, we all experience symptoms of like we all experience depressive symptoms. That doesn't mean we have depression. We all experience anxious symptoms. That does not mean we have an anxiety disorder. Right. Sometimes we back and forth, and that does not mean that we have bipolar disorder, because we all, to a certain extent, experience all those symptoms, and it can be in response to whatever is going on in our lives, and that's okay. Like, that's totally okay. But when it starts getting, to a place where it's elongated periods of time, and our bodies just physically cannot sustain at those levels. Even when we're functioning at a really low vibration over a period of time, that does something physically to your body. The chemistry in your brain is not balancing. You're not operating like optimal functioning in life. And so that's when it becomes really important to go talk to someone so that they can say, okay, how long has this been going on? Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how strong are these symptoms? They're going to try to figure out like, okay, where are you here in terms of typical functioning? Not normal, because we all have a different, normal. But, so bipolar disorder, we throw it out there. Yeah. Like, especially if people are moody and we like, girl, you bipolar. We throw that out there. But there is some very specific criteria that a clinician will be looking for to determine whether it's really bipolar disorder.
Yeah. And the people who suffer from bipolar disorder, you can typically see that it's impacting their life. Yes. Their relationship with their family, friends, people they care about, their ability to function at work would all be impacted.
Yeah. Sleep.
Yeah, sleep. Yeah. And that's another thing. I'm glad you brought up sleep, because lack of sleep can look like a disorder. Yeah. Like if let's say you don't get sleep. Sleep deprivation can actually make you hallucinate. Yeah. People don't know that. It's really important to be sleeping on a normal routine, normal pattern. And mental health professionals might actually ask you questions about your sleep so they can rule things out. But sleep deprivation can look like disorders, especially in kids.
I'm getting nervous now. Y'all keep shooting out symptoms that I got.
Put them kids in the bed.
I was going to say, my son goes to sleep early. It's 6 o'clock.
Yes. You got to put them kids in the bed.
Every time she mentions that you're not able to function at work, I get nervous, because I'm dysfunctional at work now. Well, I hate going to work with certain people I don't talk to.
Ryan want us to
I go in there, I'm angry. Hey, you know what? Hey, some of the younger kids say, you're a grumpy. I'm the grumpy old man.
Ryan we are not diagnosing.
not.
Okay,
Just
you know
so
what?
know.
When y'all leave here, don't say, "Hey, that
We
boy
not.
crazy."
We're not. We're not. Nope.
I'll be like, tell me, y'all. What y'all think?
And then when she brought the sleeping disorder in, like, you know what? I'm gonna pull myself out of this because I'm getting nervous.
I'll be like, what y'all think? Am I safe?
Ryan, we not doing it.
Right,
We are not doing it.
I average about 4 hours of sleep a day.
That's not
good.
enough. That's not. I will say
is
that.
not
Hey, you
enough.
see these bags? Hey, I didn't buy these. They just popped up.
You know what? I've been learning more. I love anatomy, and I've been learning more about the body.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not know how important, like you said, sleep is for everything, mental, physical. Like there's some times when it's hard to lose weight or get in shape because you're not sleeping enough.
Yeah.
I'm like, you could be eating the right things, working out, but if you're not getting rest, it's like, no, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
The body is interesting.
Yeah.
Let me tell you. So I'm kind of a brain geek.
Okay.
I love the learning about how the brain works and like the chemistry and you know, I have an interest in little small children. Like early childhood age kids are like my jam. I love them. So learning about how their brains form from the bottom up is just I could listen and read about that all day long. But I say all that to say that that informs what I do in my clinical practice, because I know that whatever is going on with us and how we're operating in the world ultimately has to do with what's going on in our brains. Like, and I think if we understood that we have so much control and power over how our brains function, we'd be able to take care of ourselves better, for sure. Like what you're saying about the sleep.
Yeah.
That's such a big deal. Like, it's such an easy thing to manipulate. Like, if we really realized how important sleep was, we would take our asses to bed.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? We would take naps.
And
like,
turn that phone off. Mine used like to
unplug.
unplug, like completely unplug.
Absolutely.
Our society should encourage, you know, things that help us to sleep more. Like, we should get midday naps as adults.
At work, right?
I think
What
so.
I think. It's just what I think.
It's my nap
I agree
time.
with that.
Right.
So we get an hour lunch and a nap time. I'm cool with
We
that.
need it.
All right, I got a question. This is about kids too, and I can only say this about black families because that's the only families I've been around. ADHD. Black moms don't believe in that. They don't believe that's a diagnosis. No, she just needs to sit her butt down. Ain't nothing wrong with her.
She just need a whooping.
That's it. You go in that corner and talking about some ADHD. You better get on it. You know what I mean? Is that something that a lot more kids would be diagnosed with, like if they would like take it to a professional?
I think, like Kristina touched on earlier about schizophrenia being or black people being, or black men being diagnosed more often than other races. ADHD that's also true for black kids. And I don't necessarily think that our mental health professionals are responding culturally, responding in culturally sensitive ways. For example, our black boys might be more hyperactive than what they see on a regular basis. That doesn't mean they have ADHD. I do think ADHD is a real thing. I do think that. But I also think that some of our mental health professionals are not responding in culturally sensitive ways. So going back to that question about, is it hard to diagnose disorders? It is. And that point that you bring up is one of the things that makes it hard too. But I do see ADHD a lot in the schools. I do. But
So you never just say that little kid is bad.
you know what? Sleep deprivation can look like ADHD too.
Yeah. You know what else can look like ADHD? Attachment issues.
Yes.
So my perspective on this ADHD thing, I very similar to what Tricia's saying. I believe that it's very real. The research supports that it's very real, and that it's based on the chemistry of the brain, and there's a dysregulation that happens within the kids. So we know it's real because they see it, you know, they're able to pinpoint it. However, most kids that get diagnosed with ADHD are not going to a doctor and having all those tests run where they're able to see the chemical imbalance before they stick a kid on medication and label them with that. They basically see behaviors that are difficult to manage and they head down that route pretty quick. Mm-hmm. I do think, like Trish said, that there can be a overdiagnosis of ADHD, but I also think there's some validity to what you said about how Black people don't believe in it. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, for good reason. Like, you know, Black people don't fool with medical. Yes. Black people don't. And she said the right word, like fool. We don't fool with that. Black people don't fool with, you know, diagnosis and mental health, interaction with the mental health system in general, but for good reason. It's not like Black people just as a whole decided we're not fooling with that because it's dumb. You know, there are a lot of really understandable reasons why we don't. There's general mistrust of system. I mean, there are reasons why we don't. You know, even as a mental health professional and a Black woman, all of my training was very biased. Mm-hmm. You know, all the stuff that I learned about how to diagnose, about how we look at behavior and all that was from a very Western point of view. It's from this framework of what white people do and how they think and how they act and how they interact with society. So I understand why Black people might be quick to dismiss certain things. So I think that happens. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Black mamas be like, whatever. Mm-hmm.
Ain't nothing wrong with her.
I'm going, you know, you just going to get this whooping. We're going to whoop this hyperactivity out of you, which doesn't work.
No.
But then also the system doesn't respond well. So we have these two problems and there's really not a solution in place for either of the problems. So I wish I could be like, but here's the solution. It's not. It's not one. Not right now. There's not. We're working.
And go lay down is not a solution.
Working on it.
Hey, go take a nap.
Go lay down.
No, it's not a solution. You know, but
get some of that touch.
Tell on y'all.
Lay out, take a nap.
I know a few people do.
Listen, Trish taking all y'all tricks. Don't do that.
Baby, no Benadryl.
Don't you?
Mama hide the bottles.
But yeah, I mean, there are so many things that could cause a child to have all the, you know, the symptoms or behaviors that look like ADHD. Like it could be attachment stuff where a child is not getting enough love and attention from their caregiver, and so they gonna do whatever it takes to get you to look at them, even if it's bad attention. You know, they're gonna do all the stuff that it takes because that is built into us from the time that we're young to connect. And if you teach me that all I can do is get negative connection, that's better than no connection. So I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing what it takes. And then you going to tell me I'm bad. And then they going to tell me I have ADHD. I mean, like, attachment stuff can look like that. It could be sleep. It could be diet.
Diet, yes.
Oh, my gosh. Like, sugar. If kids are getting just ridiculous amounts of sugar, it's not good. What else, Trish? Like, there's a lot of things that can result in symptoms of ADHD.
I'd say sugar and sleep, like diet and sleep, is pretty big.
Yeah.
Especially for the little ones. I know it's so easy to get them the little prepackaged whatever and get them what they want, but it ultimately affects the way their body processes things and their behavior. Yeah. So,
and then also, like, not to bring the show to a heavy place, but like young kids and old people are the highest populations of people who experience like sexual abuse and physical abuse. So, you know, that's my area.
That's another reason.
And so because we have young children that are experiencing sexual abuse at higher rates than like adults our age, and mainly because they're very vulnerable. Most of the time they can be manipulated. That's why they are most likely to be victimized, because they can be easily manipulated. They are not as verbal. They most of the time don't understand what's happening to them, so they don't even know to go say something, or they don't use the right words. They don't know the right words to describe what's happening to them. But sexual trauma can cause kids to have the same symptoms as ADHD or acting out or conduct disorders, all these different things that get assigned to kids.
Absolutely.
And you just have no idea that something has happened to them and they don't have a way to express or advocate for themselves. So those kinds of things can also be the reason why. Yeah. And you know, people don't want to really deal with that
especially in our community.
They do not. Especially if it's somebody uncle, because
Yes.
The perpetrators of sexual abuse and physical abuse are
it's
usually
in the family,
somebody close to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not stranger danger, which we all grew up learning.
Yeah.
You know,
it could be child on child.
Yep, that happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
We don't want to talk about that.
We got a little heavy.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
No,
You got a lot heavy.
Man, I'm sorry, y'all. I
deep.
just brought us way down below the baseline. My
That was deep, but it was something that needed to be said.
Absolutely.
It is. I think it's something that people need to say. I have a son. He's 3. And I hear a lot of people say, watch out for your daughters. Watch out for your daughters.
Oh, son.
And I'm like, that is crazy. Because males, especially young, because like you said, you can tell them, well, you're supposed to be a man and men don't do this. And they're more likely not to say anything because you're telling them that, like, you're a boy. You're not supposed to cry. Mm-hmm. Yeah, shame is get you to stop saying anything. Right. So I'm like, you got to watch your boys, too, just as hard as you have to watch your girls.
Absolutely.
I think it's just we don't, in our community, we don't get that. Just be vulnerable and listen. And you may not want to talk about these things, but the person that you're raising, it's going to affect somebody else because most likely sexual abuse kids end up growing up and, doing the same. And not everybody, but in most cases, if they don't have anybody to talk about it with or they're holding those things inside, you're going to take it out
it's going to definitely affect them.
Yeah. So either way, you're going to get it out, so I think we don't talk about it enough. So thanks for the heavy.
Sorry.
No, thank you for the heavy. Appreciate it.
Sorry, and you're welcome.
We need to hear it. Let me see. There's so many.
These have been some good questions.
There's so many.
These have been great.
You better hurry up. I'm about to ask another one.
No, go ahead. Hurry up. Yeah, that was my little input. So.
All right, I read a little bit last night about post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. And when I first started hearing about that, it was only like they were talking about soldiers coming home from the war or something like that, like, and having like flashbacks of things that were going on over there. So, are regular people diagnosed with that?
Yes,
absolutely. Think about.
You see how she looked at me like, yes, of course. What you think?
And it's some of the things that you guys don't even realize could be post-traumatic stress disorder. So, for example, I'm going to take it back to kids. Kids experiencing their parents in tumultuous, volatile relationships could have impacted them so much so that they are not functioning well at school. And they might grow up to start engaging in drug use. They may not be able to tell you why things like that are going on, but the idea of experiencing trauma at a very young age is very impactful to their development going throughout life. And they might not even know or be able to verbalize why it is they can't form or maintain a relationship, but trauma could be the reason. Let me bring it back to the Black community. The things we grew up seeing. Do you remember when we were growing up? I went to like funerals every couple of weeks or months, and that's not normal. Like,
not at all.
Our friends no longer being a part of our circles. Death was very common in our. That's trauma, and growing up. Not trusting people, not getting close to them with the idea of they might die in a couple of weeks. That's a result of being through experiencing traumatic events. And so people might develop abandonment issues, an over-reliance on drugs or things to help them calm down, to deal with stress and anxiety. Like all of those are a result of trauma or traumatic events in their lives. Like, so many people deal with it, and it's probably not diagnosed, but they've learned different ways to cope with it. Some of them healthy ways, some of them unhealthy ways, but a lot of people experience PTSD.
Like, I would even assert that probably most of us, I bet at some point all of us at this table have experienced some symptoms of PTSD at some point in our lives. Because like Trish was saying, that she was describing what trauma is. Trauma is super individual. So each of us get to define what is traumatic to us. So me and you could have been, like, say we yesterday were riding in a car together and get into a car crash. We're in the same experience, but it could affect you different from the way it affects me, right? So what's traumatic to me might not be traumatic to you, and vice versa. But all of us have experienced something traumatic, because the definition really of a trauma is an experience that you have that causes a distress, causes you to feel distress. And all of us, and if you think about young kids, you know, they have the least amount of tools to cope with life than anybody. So lots of things they experience are traumatic to them. Like, we can't assume, but many times they're experiencing things that we think are like nothing.
Yeah, like, get over it.
Yeah,
right.
Like, and it can be super traumatic to them. So then when you start having symptoms, you know, where you start having nightmares about something that's happened to you, or you think about it and you start having like shortness of breath, or you're like,
your heart beats faster.
Like,
yeah.
Why does that feel so tight? You know, like, or something happens seemingly unrelated to the trauma, and it triggers, like, kind of flashes you back maybe to the same feeling that you had, or a memory of something that happened to you. That's all consistent with PTSD. You don't have to have been in a war to experience PTSD. You know, all of us have probably experienced some symptoms of PTSD at some point. So I'm gonna give you an example of like some self-disclosure. My son was in a car crash, really bad one. And for 2 years after the crash, I couldn't ride down Highway 35 because the crash happened on 35, and I wasn't in the crash with him, but I saw the pictures. So there's a lot of things about that experience that have traumatized me. But this is just one piece where I couldn't even travel down 35 past that area where the crash occurred for 2 years. So I would be going places going the hell a long way. So I wouldn't have to pass that part of the highway because, I mean, he almost died in this crash, and the car had rolled over multiple times, and it was like smashed, and you could see for a while, you could like see some of the skid marks on the shoulder. And I was just like, no, I'll just go, just go around. It's cool. I'll plan.
But just leave early.
20 extra minutes. I just go around. I cannot, you know, and I travel that way all the time before that. It just did something to me. Like, I just couldn't. That's PTSD. And there are things that happen. So sometimes people experience PTSD and don't realize it because, like, say something happened to you when you were young and you didn't even have language. You can have pre-verbal trauma. And just when whatever was happened to you, it made you feel a certain way. Maybe it made you feel extreme fear, like terror, or you felt extremely anxious. Well, so then that kind of creates this belief system. Your brain catalogs the experience and then the way it made you feel. Then as you have different experiences throughout your life, your brain will take that and measure it against stuff you've experienced in the past and be like, okay, is this the same? Is this different? Is it similar? And so you might start developing a pattern of feelings based on similar experiences and not even know that you've created this link of like chain of experiences that all make you anxious. They might not all be the same thing, but you have the same kind of feeling, and your brain is like remembering and creating this chain. So PTSD can also work where you have a series of experiences that just kind of bring you back to day one, like, oh God, why do I feel like, and you might not even know, especially if the experience was from when you were super little. You might just be like, I get so anxious when this happens and I have no idea why. That can also be PTSD. So it's
like when number 6, I got that too. I got all of this stuff.
There are a lot of things we experience that we might not even fully understand it all, and that's totally okay.
It made a whole lot of sense. And I've never heard of a person say they were diagnosed with that. Like I said, you always see specials, post-traumatic stress disorder with soldiers and stuff like that. It's the only time I heard about it. So I'm glad I got that answer, got that definition of it. You going now? You want some of this?
I definitely do.
You want some of this action?
So on the news, you'll hear most Caucasians, you know, if they do something like shoot up something or school or something, and they'll say mental illness, right? But when it's a black person, you know,
come on now,
Better get into it.
Yeah,
they're just rowdy.
Yes.
And they just, you know,
Thugs.
have no respect. They're thugging. They're no one ever talks about us having mental health issues.
Yep.
Why is that? Or why do you, as professionals, why do you think that is?
that was deep
Is it because
and real.
Yeah. Is it because we don't have previous like records of going? I have to ask these questions because I know some people be like, but, you know, because there's always a but, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do this. Like, why is that?
Could be implicit bias where they don't necessarily know that they're holding some kind of bias against another race. It's almost like they refuse to see the good in other races, and I don't have a solid explanation as to why they do things like this, but I do know that it's systematic racism and it's prevalent. I mean, there's no way around the explanation without bringing in racism.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because that's, I mean, period.
I
mean, the real
Period. That's all there is to it.
honestly, the real, yes, systematic racism. Yes. You know, we. Boy.
No, go get. You know what? Get into it because we do like
Even as a mental health person of color, and I work, you know, we talk about this all the time. You know, you can be surrounded by people. We've all had the same training. We all have the same obligation to see people, be open, non-biased, all that. But racism is so pervasive and people don't even realize, no matter what their profession is, no matter what their obligation to everybody's mental health wellness is, they still have these implicit bias ideas, thoughts, beliefs about people that don't just go away because you get a degree in counseling or psychology or social work. Just because you're able to pass whatever exam to, you know, and get credentials or whatever, your belief system doesn't automatically change with those credentials. If you deep down still don't acknowledge that America systematically perceives black skin as a threat, then you're not going to be effective, period. As a therapist, as a person who gives your opinion on why, you know, these shootings occur and why one group of people has mental health issues and the other group of people have criminal backgrounds, so they're more likely to, you know, do this type of behavior. No, absolutely not. We all know that we're human beings and we all experience the same mental health issues. We all experience symptoms of things. We all have that. And black skin is not, you know, it is perceived as a threat. It gives you an automatic criminalization. I mean, it just is what it is. And these are things we have to acknowledge.
Yeah.
So even when we're talking to other mental health professionals and they might try to rationalize why, no, if you're not talking about racism, then I'm gonna be side-eyeing you as a mental health professional, like as a credible. Okay, guess who's not referring black people to you? Because you're gonna sit in the room with a black person and not acknowledge the realness of what they experience in their life. I think, I mean, there's really not any other rationale for why we are treated differently other than racism. Systematic and on a personal level, like people don't want to acknowledge because people don't want to be bad people out here. You know, I'm a good person. You know, I care about everybody.
I have a black friend.
Yeah. I've heard that
I
a
have
lot.
2 of those. So do you think that, not to say you want to tell people where to go, but I think some people don't go get help because you feel like, well, this person wouldn't understand me, or this person
That's
wouldn't
real.
get where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
So would it, if for people who are like that, you would suggest that they see someone who could like understand their situation, opposed to just saying, I went to somebody.
Yeah. So like during the month of May for Mental Health Awareness Month, I did like a series of posts that I was really started out thinking that I just wanted to raise awareness about mental health issues that come up for people, that and write in a way that were really relatable, that anybody would read them and be like, oh, I'll be feeling like that sometimes.
They were really good too.
You know, and so that was really my goal. But do you know that from that, I got so many contacts, people that I knew, people I didn't know, people who were like, oh, so-and-so told me to send you a direct message to find out, you know, could I make an appointment with you? Do you know other Black therapists? I got so many contacts just from doing that, where people were asking me and admitting, I've never been to therapy before, but I think I should talk to somebody. And I just like affirmed the heck out of them people. Like, that is so dope. Like, do you know how strong and courageous it is for you to say that you think you want to sit and just talk to someone? Because there doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong, but just to sit across from somebody who doesn't know you, they're not going to judge you.
Right.
They're trained to help you sort through certain things, and they can just kind of help you, give you a fresh perspective. It can be as simple as that. And so I would just like build them up like, this is so great. I'm so happy you asked me, you know, but it was so many people and I could not believe it. So I had put together a little short list of Black therapists that I was referring people to, because so many people were reaching out to me. So I was like, shoot, let me get this list then. Because I'm not in private practice, so I'm not taking just general clients. I work at an agency and we see like a certain population of people. And because of that, and all these people were hitting me up. So I was like, I need a little list.
I wonder if
a Black therapist then I can send people to.
The blacklist.
I wonder if by the time this podcast airs, if any of your audience would be interested in seeing that list.
Yeah.
To maybe you guys can post.
Yeah, I'll share.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, you know, I would tell people too about other resources that were ways to find people. So like there are a couple directories out there. There's one that's therapyforblackgirls.com. There's a podcast. And then there's a directory that you can get on there and pick your state and find. It's all therapists of color. You can find somebody that's Black. And they have to pay to be on the registry. I'm on there. There's there's a melanin and mental health directory. You can get on there and search for a Black therapist. There's so I love that all these
melanin and mental health.
Yes.
I like the sound of that.
And then there's a directory that's just a general mental health directory. It's psychologytoday.com, and that is a comprehensive directory of all therapists of all colors. But the cool thing about that directory is that you can look in your area, and all of the people have a profile with their picture, with their areas of specialty. They tell you exactly what they're trained in, what they focus on. They tell you their price range. They tell you what insurance they take. Like, that's a lot of information to get up front before you call. And you can find out where they are. And so those are some good resources that I don't think a lot of people know about.
Yeah, I agree. And let me say this. I don't necessarily think that the person has to be your race in order to give you good information or be a good therapist. But if some people are struggling with being open or forming a relationship, a trusting relationship with someone that does not look like them, then these are good resources for you.
Yeah. Or if you know the issues that you specifically want to come in and talk about are race related, because that's real too. Like, in terms of trauma, race related trauma is so real,
especially in the climate today.
Yes. So real.
Yeah.
So so if you know that you want to come in because you just feeling, as a Black man, I'm just, and that's the stuff you want to work through, it may be easier to get that off your chest, because there's a lot of research that shows that clients are less likely to talk about race-related stuff or oppression related stuff or discrimination related stuff with therapists that don't look like them.
Right.
So if you know that that's going to come up, or you know you want to process through some of that stuff, it may be easier
to do that with.
Yeah.
And just to get a better understanding too, because when you think of a doctor, if you go in for a diet or something and they're like, well, you know, you need to stop eating all this stuff that you're eating, and you're kind of like, I was raised on this stuff, you know. When so to get somebody who say, yeah, I know you were. However,
yes, yeah,
do an alternative that is like this,
yeah,
where you can still, you know. So I think that's
it
dope.
might be helpful to hear from a person of color who also was raised that way. But
and again, not to say that you have to,
Right.
not to say that that's something you have to do, but just for people who have a hard time opening up, like me, I'm like, okay. But for people who are like, no, I'm talking to somebody like that, you know, there's options, and that's a good thing. And then it makes more kids, especially Black kids, say, well, we need more people in this area, or we need to do this. So this is interesting to get into. I like that.
And I do know quite a few therapists who are not Black that are super like self-aware, super empathetic, are allies who would be fine to sit in a therapy session and hash through race issues, oppression issues. I know a good handful that would be phenomenal. The only thing is that to the general public,
right,
they wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
And so, but I do. So when people are asking me for referrals, I'll be like, okay, now this person isn't Black, but she's dope. And you can pretty much talk to her about anything. For real. You can. And so I try to, you know, vouch for my people that I know are good. But to the general public, you know, people wouldn't know that. I wish there was some kind of like association or we could be like, they cool, you know, like, for real. They real cool. The little right.
Maybe.
I do wish there was some kind of accreditation we could develop and be like, they passed. They cool.
That would be nice. You know, they have for college professors. They're like, do you know this
right.
one is okay?
The rate your professor.
Yeah,
I know.
I love that.
That's
so
true.
yeah, so you should get that about doctors and everything. At your own risk.
Right.
All right, a second ago, you spoke on medical insurance and, like, the types of insurance that are taken. You think, like, for low-income Black families, like, they're kind of standoffish. I mean, they don't want to take their kid because they're saying, okay, therapy costs money. Yeah. Medication costs money if it's needed. So you think that's one reason why they won't go?
Yeah. It's definitely a big barrier for, I think, all people, but specifically for the Black community. When we're prioritizing we're making our budgets and we're prioritizing what we're going to spend our money on. If we already don't really feel like mental health treatment or attention is real or necessary or whatever, then that's going to be way low, you know, on the list of things we'll be willing to spend our money on. And so, yes, you know, insurance, the way that our insurance systems are set up really are kind of a racket when it comes to mental health. And any clinician who is on an insurance panel will tell you that, one, it's really hard to get approved on an insurance panel. Then also from a clinician perspective, there are so many things that we have to do to get paid, like to get reimbursed from insurance companies and get things covered and all of that. So I can imagine that from just a client standpoint or from a regular person thinking about, well, first I got to look and see who my insurance covers. And then I get a little list and I might call each one and see how I feel. Like, that's a lot. That's a lot of hurdles, you know? And most of us, if we already are stressed, that's enough to discourage us right there, you know? Now, one of the things I was thinking about in preparation for this was to talk a little bit about mental health agencies in this area where people can go and they don't have to have insurance or they don't even bill insurance. So there are a lot of mental health agencies in the Kansas City area that are funded, get specific funding from like the government, the state, the county, to provide services to people who are like considered the underserved people of, you know, this area. So that could be people who have insurance or the people who make just enough money to not qualify for Medicaid, but they don't make enough money to really be able to afford insurance. Those people who are right in the middle. There are places, and I hate that this is our fault as mental health providers. We don't really put ourselves out there. We don't advertise that like, hey, we're a place where you can come and you don't have to worry about us billing your insurance. And for the most part, you don't have to pay. Like we get money to see you. So there, and I could give you guys like a list of places. So if you want to post it, there are some agencies that may be familiar names like the Family Conservancy. You know, they have offices in Kansas City, Kansas. They have offices in Roland Park. They got offices in Missouri. They get specific money. Our agency gets specific money to provide mental health services to people who are the underserved. And underserved means you are the people who are least likely to take advantage of services. That doesn't necessarily mean like they're, you know, but underserved means you are not taking advantage of healthcare the way that you could or should, or you're not taking advantage of mental health services the way that you should or could. So yeah, there are ways to get what you need without having to get tangled up in the insurance web.
Okay,
I'll definitely post it. I think that's what we need to start, because I didn't know that. I didn't know.
And so like a homegirl, just for example of, I mean, it's sometimes it can be hard to find this out, but like a homegirl I went to college with, she was talking to me about her brother needing some mental health attention. They live in St. Louis. And I was like, well, I don't really know about the services in St. Louis, but I know that based on his life experience, he would qualify for this federal money. So let me go to the state's website for this funding, and then I'm going to look and see what agencies get this money in St. Louis. So then I get my little list, and I start calling the agencies on her behalf and find out, like, are y'all taking clients right now? You know, what's the waiting list like? And so I was able to send her that information. But I know that because I'm on the inside, you know, and that's hard to navigate that or find out stuff like that. But
sidebar, that's why we need more of us in the mental health field.
We do.
For people like us who grew up in neighborhoods where, you know, predominantly Black, and we know the culture, I think it's really helpful for us to be in positions and to be at the table where we're talking about how we impact our community. So if y'all out there and y'all interested in the mental health field, please join us.
Or get in touch with us some kind of way, because we would love to encourage you to go down that career path. Like, I try to be at every career day I get invited to. I do. I mean, let me tell you how dope it is to be a therapist.
I mean, like, it's not today. So, it's tomorrow. I'll be back. I think that's good, though. That is.
But we do need more. There needs to be more of us. You're right, Trish.
That's interesting, though. I have a question for kids.
Okay.
The signs, early signs, like, maybe my kid needs to just speak to someone else. How do you come to that conclusion of?
I'll tell you, the first sign we usually see in kids is behaviorally, whether it's at home and at school. So sometimes it might show up at school, but you never see those types of behaviors at home. It could be something we need to change in the school environment to get better responses from the child. But typically, the early signs are the child is either acting out in both the home and school, or their sleep or their eating habits are really different than what they used to be. Some other signs. And I'm just talking about in general, any type of disorder, not specific to ADHD or anxiety, or but you usually see it show up in their behaviors.
And the youngest that you guys have seen?
I will say the youngest to receive like mental health diagnosis, like ADHD, could be kindergarten, school age. It's really hard to decide what's going on with like 3-year-olds and younger. But I will say things like autism show up really early. The first couple of years, you will see early signs of autism. And there could be language delays that give you indication that there may be something going on. There could also be failure to like interact with other people around them, or trouble reading social cues, or smiling, looking at you, sharing interests. like showing you things. What's some other early signs? I think a big red flag would be the language development or the lack of language. If kids are not like talking to you by 2, at least 1 to 2, 3 word sentences, 1.5, 2 years old, that could be a sign. But it could also be a sign of a language development issue,
right?
Not necessarily autism, but they do show up. Like in infants, you might see that the infant is not like smiling. Usually they can smile at you by 2 months, 3 months. But if they're not smiling, they're not like interested in your face or gazing at you. Let me see what's some other signs in the infant.
Like if you're looking at the attachment relationship, it's like some
kind of
of
standoffish.
Yes, like if there seems to be a disconnection between even the infant and their primary caregiver, then you can. That might be an indication that there's something going on attachment-wise, which can affect like a whole lot of stuff. But so like there are even some preventative in infant mental health. Like we do some preventative work at my agency where case managers go out and visit new parents that are either pregnant or have just had a baby. And when they're there, they do some assessments like on that parent-child interaction to make sure that the attachment is what we would want to see. And if it's not, then there's interventions like to help encourage the attachment. Because sometimes you'll see behaviors like in the infant where they're not really responding, but it's because the parent is
exposure.
Yeah,
lack of exposure.
Like, maybe there's some stuff going on with the parent that's just affecting the baby. Because that whole attachment thing is a two-way street.
Yeah.
But it can have real serious impacts on a developing child if that attachment part isn't there real early on.
Okay. Taking notes and taking notes. No, because
I had a question. I lost it. But
I don't think we, like Ron said, sometimes we'll wait till it gets bad instead of just saying, oh, this is odd. So let me just go check on it or see what's going on with it. So it's important to...
And there are places that actually will take kids that are like 5 and under, like, and do therapy with them. So like I'm trained in play therapy, which is a whole treatment modality for children as young as like 2 or 3, where you really are using play as a means to have children work through trauma or traumatic experiences. They don't really have to verbalize anything. So like there's a whole way of doing that like ways of being trained and using a playroom, that has a variety of therapeutic toys, and there are other different techniques like sand tray where kids are using an actual, looks like a little miniature sandbox, but they use little miniature pieces to put in the sand tray, and without even giving instructions, kids will play out the things that have happened to them or that they've seen that have been traumatic without any language. It can be so powerful, y'all. I'm not even playing. Like, I have been in sessions where I've been like trying not to cry, like, oh my God, like, where I've seen children working through stuff, like really traumatic things like sexual abuse at a super young age where they weren't able to talk or have any language, and they are playing it out. And you see it like with the toys that they have, and but we're wired to work through things. Like that's the dope thing about us as human beings. Like we were created to heal ourselves in the process through things. So even children as young as 2, 3, 4, they can heal and they can work through stuff. So they don't carry it with them into their lives if they have good intervention, like early.
Early intervention is key.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, I have a question about depression. Like lately, and it's always been going on, but lately it seems like you see a lot of suicides, like high-profile people. Are there always signs when a person is depressed?
There's always signs. There are always signs.
Because sometimes you hear about people being able to keep a good face on when they're around everybody else, but then when they're behind closed doors, it's like they really feel like terrible. So
yeah, I think the people close to you or close to those people who have depression are able to speak to the differences in their behaviors or the patterns in their behaviors. But yeah, there are clear signs that we are able to look for, like any changes in their behavior. For example, if they used to be around people a lot and now they've decided they don't even want to do the things they used to love to do. Feelings of unhappiness or sadness for a long period of time, and even talking to friends, telling friends that I don't feel like I'm good at anything, or just feelings of inadequacy if they're talking about they don't feel worthy, or feeling like a burden to people. Like, I don't want anybody to worry about me. Y'all don't have to worry about me. I'm, that kind of thing. I'm gonna be all right. I'm gonna do my, that kind of thing. And then eating too much, eating not enough, changes in their weight, Sleep is a big.
Sleep is like in bold.
Yeah, because when stuff is going on with you, you either can't sleep. Like, seriously, when stuff is going on with you, you either can't sleep, or that's all you want to do.
And let me tell you something that shows up. Like, I'm a firm believer that Black people display some of these symptoms in different ways. So our sadness could look like anger. We're angry. Anything I say or do to this person pisses them off. Or I could also be annoying. But for the most part, a depressed person is very irritable or easily agitated.
So they don't have to be crying.
Right. They don't have to be crying like, woe is me, or any of that. It could be, I'm just pissed off. I'm annoyed. I don't want to be around family. I don't want to be around my spouse or anything. And
that's me. When I have experienced symptoms of depression personally, I'm not like sad and all that. Like, I tend to be an asshole.
Yeah, they may say mean things to other people.
And I be at work, and people want to come talk to me, and then I'll just have to give people a disclaimer like, listen, I'm an asshole today. So whatever comes out of my mouth might not be, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So what I'm saying is right, but it might not feel good how I'm about to say it. So I do warn people, but I know myself. And so, my depressed don't look sad.
It's funny because that's me. I'm irritable, and I'm just like, I just need for you to leave me alone for a minute.
Right.
And just let me get it together. And then after that, hey, we come have a conversation. We could talk. Because Ron knows I'm like, hey, how you doing?
That's
What's
me
going
on a regular. And
and then I'm like, it's not a good day.
Yeah.
So, but I'm telling you.
To have those days. It's depression when it's more than 2 weeks and you just can't get yourself out of this funk.
Yeah.
And
so those signs, you ask, are there signs? Yes. Yes, there
clear
are.
ones.
Let me tell you, I get this a lot when people, when you're a mental health professional, people always want to ask you stuff, and and they want to tell you stuff, and they, they think you're going to just shrink them up real quick and get them back on their way. But
I got 5 minutes. What you got for me?
Right.
And I'll be like, no, that's not how this works. But I do have people that ask me, I got this friend or my brother, man, they just out here wilding. They doing wild stuff, and I know it's just for attention. They just doing wild stuff because they want attention. They're just getting on my nerves, and I'm like, well, perhaps that person needs your attention.
Right.
And then they're like, no, you know what I mean? You know how people just do annoying stuff because they just want some attention, or they just out here, doing crazy. I'm not feeding into that. And
they're telling you.
They are telling you something. They are communicating a need. I think one of the biggest issues with us as human beings, we've not been taught very well how to identify what we need, like deep, what we need deeply, and then how to ask for it directly. Right. Like, most of us don't know how to do that. We haven't been taught. So, and sometimes we had parents that made us feel like our needs were too much. So what we ended up doing was learning how to manipulate people to get our needs met. And I know manipulation has a very negative connotation, but you know, what manipulation is like going in a roundabout way to get what I really need without, because I know if I ask you directly, you're going to be like, girl, bye. So I'm going to just, in a roundabout way, get you to do what I need you to do. And so when people come to me and they're like, what do I do? Because they just acting crazy. They doing this. And I know they just need attention. I really don't want to give in to it. And I'm like, you know, those sometimes are people who might be their way of trying to show you that their needs are really great. And maybe they're considering, you know, what the world would be like without them in it.
Yeah.
Because, you know, suicidal ideation is very common. Like a lot of us have that thought process of like, dang, maybe everybody else would just be so much better if I wasn't here. Or life would be so much easier if I just was gone. And then, you know, so-and-so could be with it. Everything be fine. Things would be better. And people feel that way from time to time. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to create a plan and carry it out and all of that. Because that's when it's real. When you know, people start making plans. But the thoughts, people have them. People have them. And that's, to a certain extent, I'm not going to say it's okay, but it's normal. And I think if more people knew that we think like that sometimes. We wonder like that sometimes. Sometimes we get low and we think there's just really, I don't have nothing else for life right now. You know what I mean? Like, I ain't got nothing else for this life right now. I'm tired of adulting. I'm tired of contributing to society. I'm tired of trying to follow the rules. I'm tired of paying my bills. I'm tired of working. And we just get to this.
Those were all
place,
me.
You know?
Those were all me.
Hey, that life bill. That life bill make you reconsider some things.
Them stresses,
do I really need?
It's hard. You know, life is very hard. But I hate when people get quickly irritated with loved ones who seem to have this attention-seeking behavior, and then want to just kind of disengage. Like, sometimes we need to do that for our own sanity, and I understand that. But we need to start asking more questions. Not like what's wrong with him, but
connect.
What's going on? Like, what's really going on with them? Why are they feeling like they need this attention? Like, what's underneath that? Like, I see what you're doing on the surface. It's ridiculous. I get it. But what's under that?
Yeah, I don't expect everybody to know how to connect or to be there for people. But what you could make sure you do is not dismiss their feelings.
Yeah.
Just listen. Or suggest that they go talk to somebody who, like you said, like a neutral person. And
who'll understand more.
Yeah. Because for real, a lot of people don't know how to listen.
Yes, that is.
And they don't know how to be there for other people. So I think the thing that you can do or maybe avoid doing is dismissing their feelings.
Yeah.
What else?
Do you think?
What else, Ron? Ron, what else do you have?
I think this may be one of my most important questions. So, for like you said, that doesn't mean that you're planning to do anything, but for people who, in their mind, have already come to that conclusion, like, I'm out of here. Yeah, this is it. And you know, like, I'll give you some people text, some people call, like, hey, you know, I'm just calling to tell you I love you, that type of thing.
Oh, yeah, that's a sign.
Do you think, I mean, after that, is there anything else you can do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's the perfect time to be honest and say, are you thinking about doing something to yourself? Just ask them.
Yeah.
I do think that people like that, you wouldn't want to let them out of your reach. If you can be in the same place for that person, with that person, I think that's a good idea, and kind of talking them through that these feelings are temporary, but not dismissing them, but making sure they know the feelings are temporary and how much they mean to either you or other people around them, and encouraging them to get help. There are numbers you can call to kind of talk through it, but it depends on what level or what stage they are in actually committing suicide. If they've told you they got a plan, they start saying goodbye, things like that, those are the people you stay very close to, follow up with, you check in with. You may even have to call 911 for that person. But I wouldn't leave them. I wouldn't leave their side. I did have a family member at that point, and I actually made that person promise to me that I would still be able to talk to them in another hour, or just keeping them connected and keeping them engaged with me was one of the part. But there is one other sign that people don't necessarily pay attention to, and we've seen it at high school, where kids have been sad for a little bit and go through a suicide threat and that kind of thing, and then the next week they're fine. They seem like they're in better spirits. They're going to classes. They're doing their thing. Then they commit suicide
because they've already come to that conclusion that that's what they're going to do. So I'm going to do things fine now.
So you really got to stay connected with people who have made those kinds of threats or actually have a plan. It's really hard not to take on the guilt of a person, carrying it out. You're not responsible for it, but there are some things you can do to help and kind of make it less likely to be carried out.
Yeah.
But it's not your responsibility once it happens. It's not like you're the reason it happened. If that person still carries it out, it's not like you're the reason that it happens. But there are some things you can do to increase the likelihood that it doesn't.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's just
that was perfectly worded.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But one thing Trish says that I want to echo is the importance of asking people, like, so are you thinking about, are you thinking about hurting yourself, or are you thinking about, killing yourself? Because I think a lot of people are scared to ask those specific questions because they think that if they do, then that might push the person even closer. But when in fact that is not the case. Nope. Like, they're already thinking about it. If they already have a plan, it's not anything you can ask that's going to push them even closer. They're already there, and really asking and getting the information you need so that you can proceed accordingly is way better than not asking.
Right.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are scared to ask that.
Yeah.
And use those words like, are you thinking about killing yourself? That's kind of a scary thing to ask somebody.
Right. Just because you say it doesn't mean they're going to do it.
Yeah, you didn't put the seed in there. That seed was already in there.
Exactly.
If it's there. Yeah.
You guys have to share some links or something so I can post them too for people who have gone through that or heard someone say that. So that way they could kind of know talking points.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Let me give you this one phone number. I think there's 1-800-273-TALK. That's for people who might be thinking about suicide. And I think they can give you some feedback on what is it that you can do. If you know somebody who's talking about harming themselves, and that's one resource. Let me think of some others. I'll probably check in later.
So I could
we can give you some bullet points of what you could do.
Yeah. So I can post them and everyone else can see them too. Because I think that's important for you to, sometimes if you're not the best at communication, but that person likes coming to you.
Yes.
And that's for anybody. It's kind of like, I don't know what to say. Like, I wish I knew what to say.
Right.
Or I could be saying the wrong thing.
Yep.
Because you're vulnerable right now, and I'm still kind of like, why would you do that? So
Ooh,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. Some of the things you don't want to do, like, what you thinking?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? So selfish. You gonna go to hell. Do not bring up.
And those are the things that most people.
Shame, shame-based discouragement, which is not what
that
you
does
want.
not help.
No, it doesn't. No,
that doesn't.
No,
Stay away from that.
Stay away from that kind of talk.
And if a person is working in an environment like I had suggested to my mom. My mom works for a school district. She's a para in classrooms. And she was like, I just feel at a general loss sometimes, even for what I'm looking at, how to respond appropriately. She just was kind of thinking she wanted some training. And I had suggested to her to do a mental health first aid training.
Oh, yeah.
Those are good. Common. They're being put on by different organizations all over the Kansas City area. A lot of times they're free. You can attend for free, and it'll be a one-day thing, or I forget how many total hours it is. but it's a real general training that pretty much anybody can go to, like lay people can go to and learn about the most common forms of mental distress, like depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, some of the more extreme ones. And they specifically talk about suicide, like how to interact with somebody who is showing signs of suicidal ideation, or they talk you through, like you get to actually practice asking, are you thinking about killing yourself? Because if you think about it, that's awkward to say. Yeah. And if you don't first practice saying that, you're going to sound really uncomfortable when you're asking the person. And if you sound scared, they're going to be scared to answer you. Yeah. You know, or if you look like you freaking out, asking them like, I mean, are you thinking about, you know, they're going to be like, they can't handle it. I'm not going to talk to them about this. Right. Yeah. So it's like a good training for just everyday people. If you work with people or you work in a setting where you're like, that would be helpful. I can send you some information on how to find some mental health first aid trainings. Okay. Yeah. And they're made for non-clinicians. Yeah. That's like how they're set up. Yeah.
And the thing is, the suicidal thoughts happen more often than people actually realize. Like they're not alone in thinking that way. Actually, more people die from suicide than actually car accidents. So, I mean, it's prevalent. Yeah. It happens. And a lot of people don't think that Black people do it. We got some people from the hood who did it. Actually,
I just seen that. Somebody said that, you know, Black people don't do that. Because they were talking about what we just talked about off air, 13 Reasons Why. And a lot of people were like, well, you know, Black people don't do that. And I'm like,
ma'am, yes, we do.
Black people kill themselves.
Yeah, we do.
Like, and we'll be under stress and we'll act like everything's okay. And the next thing you know, they kill themselves. So we do it too. Absolutely. It's not just, you know, a color thing.
I read something last night that said that females only account for 25% of suicide. Like, is that a fact? And why would that be?
You know, I don't remember those stats.
Me neither.
I don't know.
Now I looked that up. I was like, wow.
That might be true. Who said it?
Right.
We gotta know the
I should have had my source pulled up.
I'm just playing. No, if you think about it, like,
I'm not surprised. If that is accurate, I'm not surprised by that. I would say that because, you know, not to like generalize about genders or anything like that, but I would say, even in my personal experience as a clinician, I find women to be to express themselves a little bit easier, to identify what they're feeling, thinking, and that kind of thing a little bit easier. And I think that has to do with the way that we groom people, women and men differently in our society. Like we are more accepting of women being in touch with their emotions than we are of men being in touch with their emotions, which is so stupid. It is literally the stupidest thing. And that if it is true that men you know, are a higher percentage of completing suicide, that makes sense then. Like if men don't have as many tools to, you know, recognize and then process through and cope with things that are happening with them emotionally, it would make sense to me then that they would reach a place where it's like, well, there's nothing more I can do. I'm out. Right. That makes sense to me.
And then you throw in the idea of the risk factors and protective factors. I think women have more, and when I say protective factors, I mean those things that make it less likely that you would develop some kind of condition or carry out suicide. So, for example, a woman might have a support system, a girlfriend she can talk to, people who she can be open with. Men may not have people that they feel comfortable talking or addressing certain issues, so that could be a risk factor, that their gender is a risk factor. But yeah, so the idea of having more protective factors versus risk factors.
Do you guys, okay, so I'm on the American Foundation of for Suicide Prevention. Okay. Is that okay? So is this where you got it says men die by suicide 3.53?
Don't give me the line. I was looking at so many websites last night.
Well, I'm looking at this website and I've just been on here for like a minute, and it's crazy. It's like super eye-opening. Look at this.
And then you add in what's going on in our community today. Like, y'all stressed out.
Yeah, you are.
Why are you looking at me?
I'm sorry, Ron. You know, let the listeners know. I'm sorry, Ron, for everything that I've said and laughed at you. You got a lot on your plate.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, me.
Like, you have to go to work, and then you see people like you dying all the time.
All the time.
And it's a lot.
And then adding on what it means to be a black man in this country, you know, that scares me. And I think about it often because I have a son. He's 11, and I'm constantly in the mode of preparing him, you know, and that whole like how I know the world is going to receive him and treat him, and then feeling somewhat inadequate as a mom because I don't know all the things that he needs to know, and I know I'm not going to really be able to speak to what his experiences will be, but that's a constant stressor that I live with every day. And so I can't imagine just what I have as a secondary person. Like if I was an actual black man, I can't imagine, like, you know, so I acknowledge the fact that I'm not even feeling the stress that you know, of your life, but I definitely can acknowledge the stress of trying to prepare somebody for that life. And that it's a lot.
It's exhausting.
And that's the
sounds like
it is exhausting.
Right. And going back to like, how do you know if it's a mental health condition or you're just going through something? I think that's something to think about too. Some of your depressions or sadness could be a reaction to the stressors you're experiencing. Not necessarily a mental health condition, but shit's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole disorder in, you know, that a diagnosable disorder called an adjustment disorder.
Yeah.
And that essentially talks about the symptoms a person can have because they're adjusting to a life experience. So like getting a divorce, you know, there's a whole period after that where your life can just be in disarray. And it might not be that you have depression or you have anxiety, but because of this experience, your life is like this. And so you know, may have an adjustment disorder, like you're just in a period of adjustment or you're responding to something that's going on with you.
Wow.
So many layers.
It is like,
this is real. This is real.
Yeah, we've talked about a whole lot, but there was so much that I saw yesterday. I was like, if we actually tried to fit most of this in, this would be like a 9-hour show.
Yeah, we can.
So we're going to definitely have to do this again. And like I said, I was a little nervous I thought you guys were going to actually show up and be all stuffy. And like, oh, this dude ain't got his hair done. I'm not coming in here. Like, when I saw her over there sitting, like, because she was across the street, I was like, she's probably thinking, like, look at these cars. I'm not going in there. Like, that ain't my house over there. Come on. All right. But I think this has been a really informative show. Hopefully it helps a lot of people. Like, if you guys have any phone numbers or contacts that we can share, like, I'm sure people want to know. Even if they don't, I'm going to shove it in their face anyway. I share a lot of things on Facebook that are like that I think that might help somebody.
I think if they want to do it like I don't know, like, you know, just a check-in. Because that way, when people listen to the show, they're like, I got questions. I want to see. So we'll do like you know, come and so that way we can talk about it again. You know, even if it's like a little segment of like, let's just talk about this. So, because I think we need our listeners, us, because I've learned a lot that I didn't know. And I'm like, not like Ron, like maybe I got that. I'm going to talk to y'all.
I think I got a lot of those things we talked about.
But no, I think it'd be good for people to hear, especially our listeners, and it's important. So we should like do this.
And we're going to have y'all back on the show to be funny. Y'all said y'all was silly and I heard y'all giggling. We always are looking for guests to come on and have fun with us. So this is
like the break.
We couldn't clown. We had to be serious this show, you know what I mean? But
it's early. So, I mean, don't let it be in the evening.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're going to get one of them.
Let us have something to drink.
We're going to get one of them evening shows going.
Exactly, because I got some yak in the refrigerator, but it was too darn early. So I didn't get to it. So
still got to go to work, right?
I still got to go to work. I got to be there like an hour and a half, and I don't want to go.
But, you know, I would love to get feedback from the people that listen, especially if we touched on some things that people want to know more about, or if there were things that they found interesting. I would love to know what people think about the things that we've said. And then also, if there are barriers that we haven't talked about or we haven't thought about, we want to be, as a mental health professional, I think it's my responsibility to know how people feel and the difficulties that they face to getting into service, because on my side, I'm responsible to changing and breaking down some of those barriers. So I want to know, what people think will be more helpful to get them where they need to be.
I like that.
This show, I think, will get a lot of feedback because it was a lot more serious. Like, we just clown, people laugh at us, and they move on. You know what I mean? But for this, I think this will actually spark more interest and things like that. Whether it affects them or someone they know, I think we definitely touched on some topics. All right. Y'all make sure y'all tune in next week. We are out of here. I got to go to work.
Later.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.